Okay, welcome to Elevating Your Voice. We're here with Marco Bravo, of course, and our special guest, the legendary Bradley Brauer. Welcome, Brad. How are you today?
Doing great. How about you, boys?
We are good, thank you. So, one of the things that we like to do with this is our second episode, so we're still kind of finding our ground. So we sent Brad some questions, and we're gonna dive into a couple of these things. But then Mark and I talked before you joined that we want to find out kind of dig deeper into what you do with Willow because that seems to be a super niche for you. Um, So Brad's been selling houses since 2000. He says we could do the math to understand the years, which I love that answer.
Not as long as Sherry and Nick, but yeah.
Right. And so one of the things I asked specifically, what's his niche? And he said his communities were historic homes. So that's great. So let's start there, Brad. Tell us a little bit about the whole Willow thing, because I know you're heavily involved in the Willow, but I'm not sure I understand completely what at one aspect and maybe others aren't as well. So let's just share that and kind of understand
One of
your
the
role.
first things I did when moving into this neighborhood was I ran into a friend of mine who was the president at the time. Um, Kind of late at night walking the dogs. And he's like, you should join the board and it would probably do a lot of things for your business. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But the eventuality was that I became the president in 2009 as Bob Cannon had stepped down, and I was there till 2015 when I was termed out. So basically 7 years of being the president of this neighborhood association, the face thereof. Took 2 years off, and Bob decided he wanted to run for president again. So I said, hey, I'll be your vice. And we were there for about 6 years. In the last 3 years, I've been the president again, getting highly involved in things that go on with the city, which is not as much fun as you might imagine, but doing a lot of things with the city that really keeps myself somewhat prominent out there. As a friend of mine told me at Evan and Vine the other night, she goes, yeah, Brad, you're kind of well known in this neighborhood. I'm like, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? But working in that community is very helpful to me in business. Going back to my beginnings, getting involved in the gay community because I was already involved. I was a bartender, for God's sake. I knew a ton of people, and using that community, that sphere of influence, if you will, back at that point in time was highly beneficial particularly when, Nick, I mean, you and I have talked about this when websites were so huge in finding buyers, finding sellers, et cetera, because they were looking for a specific type of person where I'm not as sure that websites are as effective anymore, where AI may be taking over more control over that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what is the advantage of being on the board? Obviously you're seen as a leader in that community, but can you give us a little bit more of the nuances? Like how does that, just on a day-to-day or week-to-week, how does that give you the edge over some other realtors?
Number one, it kind of puts your name and your face out there. And again, I mean, there's not a person in this neighborhood who probably hasn't heard of me in one, positive or negative shape or form. But it also, I think the majority of people in the neighborhood know who I am and what I do. And they see my sign. It's like, oh my God, I saw your sign out there. Or I saw this listing you've got for sale. Can I go see this? Would you list my house? My friend wants to move into Willow, that sort of thing, where it kind of makes me more prominent without having to go be Russell Shaw on TV.
That's awesome. So go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Do you feel like it's hard for a newer agent? I mean, you've been in this for a long time, right? And you're kind of just, a staple in that community. If somebody that's newer wanted to break into another community, do you think it's hard? How would you approach that?
When you say another community, not meaning this one?
Yes,
Yeah,
because that's your community, Brad. Nobody's allowed to touch one.
Yeah, we're not allowed to touch
yours.
Yeah, taking James Judge out with a good, dragging him out of the neighborhood. But
We could talk about that.
and Camille too. But I mean, Camille has an understanding of this as well, doing the things she's done historic. Sherry, who's done a lot in the historic neighborhoods, in particular in neighborhoods, getting yourself well known out there is number one thing. But I think the easiest way to break into neighborhoods is to represent buyers coming into it, people who want to get into those neighborhoods, and having the knowledge about those neighborhoods as to where they come from, what the history of them is. I was telling people it's this open house on Saturday that, I've got more useless shit for 1,000 Alex in my head that about this neighborhood, the things that happened from 1910 to 1950, particularly here, what the federal government did and how their changes on the Federal Housing Authority about creating the ranch, et cetera, changed the Tudor into the ranch, all that kind of information that I have that people could find interesting, but would never know that. On top of that, there's things that you know by working in these neighborhoods a lot is that there isn't an HOA. However, there is the historic preservation office department in the city of Phoenix that may have to approve what you do to the exterior of your home. And a lot of agents, when they come in here, don't know that, and they don't share that with their sellers. And Sherry and I talked about this a couple of years ago about, should the spuds or should there be a separate disclosure regarding the fact that there is another force that may control what you do or don't do to your home. And then we suddenly realize on line 25 of the spuds, it asks is if this is an historic district. That doesn't really tell you anything. Having
So
that
is
knowledge.
so like my neighborhood we don't have an HOA, we have rules and regulations, but our rules and regulations is governed by the owners of the property. So like if I have a neighbor who bucks the system that, a neighbor's only supposed to have 4 horses, but they have a mini farm over there, it's up to me to turn them into the city.
Same thing.
Okay, yeah, that's where I was told.
We have CCNRs, which would have been here since 1920 something. And for my particular subdivision, Broadmoor, we also have the Willow Conservation Plan, which the city adopted in 1986, which kind of limits on what people can do, like building a 2-story. You can't do that. If you want to build an ADU in your backyard, that's fantastic, as long as it's subordinate to the original historic home. People don't know that, and unfortunately, to make that stop, if somebody decides to do that, which is something we had to deal with a couple of years ago, and that neighbor is still pissed at me. But the reality is that this neighborhood was designed to be this way, particularly after 1986. Some things were done prior to that. With that Willow Conservation Plan, it really locked in what people can do to a neighborhood. It's again knowing that I can't go to the front of my house and put in a patio cover attached to the house. I can't do that, because then the original builder wouldn't recognize his own work if he was to drive by on his horse and buggy today.
That's pretty interesting that you have that for a historic community where, and because I've done some historical stuff, not to the level of you, Camille, and Sherry have. In fact, I've always leaned on you guys when I get that opportunity because you have that knowledge. But it's interesting that you have that. So it's all self-driven like my neighborhood is. Whereas if I were to turn my neighbors in, I'd have to go through all the process. So it's not, so you don't have a president. So is it just the board itself kind of drives around and keeps an eye on the neighborhood if they see an infraction like, hey, you got to stop that?
Not really. It really goes up to the neighborhoods. I mean, there are 997. I mean, I'm just talking about Willow itself. I'm not including Palmcroft, but they've got the same issues, every story across the street, Coronado. But it really is up to the neighbors to kind of watch what's going on. Excuse me. A lot of City of Phoenix Plan and Development will require the neighbor to go to other neighbors to sign on to something. And more often than not, they won't, because they don't want their neighborhood to change, much like the state is trying to do to us now. But that's a whole nother Megillah.
Brad, we have a question from Camille.
I see that, and I didn't know how to launch into that. But
Yeah,
so privately to Camille, or am I talking to the group?
I'll read it for the group. Brad, what do you think of the ethics of an agent that lacks geographic competency selling in Willow? Do you support a greater level of accountability for agents to know their general marketplace where they have a listing?
I kind of do, Camille, and everybody else. I kind of agree with that, just kind of. But I also have to remember that back in 2000, 2005, I didn't know squat about Goodyear, but I sold a lot of houses out there. My East Valley, I didn't know a lot of things about it. I couldn't tell you what schools are there, but I don't think that's as important to me anymore as it is to the parent. And with open enrollment, that kind of changes everything. But I think that because this does require knowledge that most people don't have, like this woman came up to me yesterday and just saw that there were cracks in the wall in the house in a lath and plaster home. That's not a foundational issue, even though I'm not a structural engineer, but she doesn't know that. And she's telling her clients that this is probably a structural issue, and it's not. Knowing things like HP, knowing historic preservation is there, knowing that there's things that you can't do to the exterior of the home needs to be shared with those people. And unfortunately, that puts that buyer in a bad position if they suddenly decide to start building it, like I said earlier, just a minor issue, a patio cover that isn't allowed to go in there.
You're right.
Well, can I
Go right ahead.
So I think that also it depends neighborhood by neighborhood, which is really, really important. So Brad and I will disagree on the 2-story carriage house addition because I was on Historic Preservation Commission at the time, and we sided with the homeowner and did not side with the neighborhood. but then the neighborhood took it to city council and they won. And so that
We also won at the Supreme Court, if you didn't know that.
okay. But my point is that it was so literally if you cross McDowell on Linwood Street, there are several. I can think of off the top of my head at least 3 houses that have 2 second-story additions, 2-story additions. And so the issue is that people can say they don't know that in Willow, this is never going to fly. Okay, because the city has a specific plan for Willow that they actually don't adhere to in other historic districts and don't really even know. And the city doesn't adhere to their plan on many, many things. It's just a general plan in many instances. But this is where it's really specific and so really important to tell people because people say, well, because generally with historic preservation, in a historic district, anything that needs a permit, you either need a certificate of appropriateness or a certificate of no effect. Getting that certificate of appropriateness really depends on the strength of the neighborhood association, the neighborhood itself, and how you go through the process. So that I think is even more important because if people ask me, could I do 2-story? I said, if you're in Willow, like technically you go through the process, but chances are like 95% you will lose. It
Okay.
may be higher than that. So my part of my
Marco's a nice guy.
question is
Yes.
to Brad, do you think with the new people, millennials and people moving in to Willow, do you think that that's ever going to change? Do you think that it's really based on the strength of you as a president and some of the other people on your board? Do you worry ever that that is actually that strength and that protection is going to go away?
Well, I have a serious worry because we've got a bunch of morons in the state legislature that are saying that the homeowner can do whatever they want to by right of ownership, which could be scraping the house next door to me and building a fourplex 2 stories high, looking into my backyard and calling it affordable housing, which of course it won't be. We've seen that. We know better. And that's what we're fighting with the city of Phoenix right now on their text amendments as to how to protect the historic districts, not just Willow, but in the historic districts in general as part of the history of Phoenix. And that's why I spent 4 hours at City Hall last Wednesday, along with a bunch of my neighbors, including Jeremy. And you should see Jeremy get all fired up. It's awesome to watch. But that's what we're doing right now in terms of what we call Safe Historic Arizona, that will protect these neighborhoods from that kind of gift to developers, so to speak. It doesn't provide the help that these people that the state says it's going to. It's really just them making money off the developer.
Okay, cool. We have a question from Jeremy. He wants you to talk about what we are fighting with.
That's what I just jumped into.
Okay, so that was all of that. Jeremy, is your question?
Yeah, that's
All right,
that's
cool.
the brief thing. We've talked about it at Airside before,
Yeah.
where Nick's like, tear the shit down, and then the rest of us are like, we're just going to kill Nick just for fun because shit, that's Sherry and Camille and I. But the reality of this is that we have this. As they said on the ABC interview I did the other day, was that we have this gem of a community of these gems of houses that don't exist anywhere else. Why would we tear them down for the sake of someone to come in here and sell rentals or short-term rentals or in next door to them and destroy that neighborhood and take it back to where it was in 1980?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. So on our little questionnaire we had here, Brad, you have 3 things that you to do every week. Do you remember those 3 things, or should I reinforce them? You can comment on them.
Nice job of corralling that, Chris. Thanks. Because, we can go on and on. The things that I like to do every week, number one is that communication and trying to really boost my presence in social media. I'm learning more and more about that. It's a little bit more difficult as you age, where it comes, I think, naturally to someone who's young and grew up with this stuff. And particularly as AI and social media do change or evolve constantly. So that's something I'm working on a regular basis, that communication with my current buyers and sellers. Kind of let's go, okay, this is what happened last week. This is information about what happened at that open house, or this is what happened on the commentary that we got, the feedback we got on your showing. This is what's going on at the houses that you're looking at. Here's some other options that you're looking at. yes, that communication is huge. And there was one other thing I threw in there, but it's not in front of me right now.
And Brad, how are you doing that? Do you have a community page or on Facebook, or how are you conveying this message to the community as a whole rather than just particular people?
I'm sorry. What message? Which message? We're talking about a lot of stuff here.
Sorry, just you said it. Just keeping the community informed, right? And Willo, is it a newsletter? Is it a Facebook community page?
We have a magazine that we put out monthly, that we've been doing for 20 something years, that has information in it constantly. We have a board meeting once a month where I've been talking about this for a year and a half, and particularly with the Saving Willo at the time, now Saving Historic Arizona. We have a webpage which is savehistoricarizona.com, plus the Willo PHX page that we post this information on constantly. We have a Facebook page in Willo that lets the neighbors know what's going on. Of course, you've got to be on Facebook to see that. And of course, our biggest issue with anything as a neighborhood is communication. We've been fighting this forever. I can't make you read the magazine. I can't make you go to the webpage. I was at a meeting at Burton Mar Library about this with Plan and Development back in August, and this woman was yelling at Josh Bednarik, the director. She's like, "Why am I just hearing about this now?" I just kept my mouth shut because it would have been nice. What I really wanted to say was like, "You pay attention, please." But and that's even nicer than I would have said. But the reality is it's very hard to get people to pay attention to that communication. So, Marco, we're doing everything we can to get the word out there about what's going on with this. And then we have a couple of people that I think there's two who are pro this. They're also renters in the community that will probably not be able to buy in this neighborhood. And one of them is a lobbyist who hasn't registered, which is kind of taking this off too.
And I guess a follow-up question is, for that magazine, who's paying for that? Because there's no
me, formerly Jeremy, formerly Nicholas. Advertisers pay for that. We are making the money because Nick and Jeremy backed out. Thank you very much. But the neighborhood pays for what doesn't get paid for by advertising. And of course, we take money from the home tour that we do every year, we net boatloads on most of the time. We've had a couple of years that stunk. One year it rained. One year we had just had a bad advertising. But most of the years we can make upwards of $50,000 in terms of net to go back into the neighborhood and do things that we need to do. And all of it, I wish I made money off it. I don't. But it really goes back into the neighborhood and taking care of the aesthetics of it, like the park across the street that I'm looking at right now. Pushing the city to do what we need them to do in terms of slowing down traffic, etc. We've also made some great contacts with the city that without the power that Willo has financially, we probably wouldn't have.
We have a couple more questions. Megan wants you to talk about the very early steps you took to get to know Willo before actually joining the committee, and how did you get all that education?
Number one, I learned about it as I was going into it, but remember the first house I sold in Willo was buying my own. That was back in 2004. We didn't have a term for it. It was called, but it eventually became known as a short sale. I had to look at Tom Bryant and say, why in God's name would a lender forgive part of a loan? And later on, years down the road, he would say, I'm never doing a short sale again. They never work. I said, one did. We got this done in 45 days by me and Andrea Kahn at the title company at the time, calling every day to that lender and saying, got house? We want to close on it. But I learned a lot from that. And of course, getting on the board helped me a lot more. But you see a lot of people come in here and I have no issue with someone brand new trying to break into something. And it's awesome that they want to do that. I'm not here to keep anybody out, whether it be a realtor or that be a buyer or seller doing whatever they want to do, or a tenant. That's not important to me. I just hope that those people will take the time to learn what they're selling. And just like me selling in Estrella Mountain Ranch back in the day, I took time to learn about those communities, particularly with the new homes. That was a little bit easier because you at least have the builder to learn things from. And it also taught me a lot about builders, going out there and talking to those builders that I still use today in working with builders who could just kind of hope I'll just drop off my client and go away. No, I don't do that. I'm going to be paying your ass till this is done because I want you to do things right.
I'm just saying. You want to take the next question there, Marco?
Yeah, in that little questionnaire, I laughed when you wrote that. We also talk about some of the mistakes or things that you would do differently. And
just three.
And we all make mistakes, and it's just we got to keep it within time frame,
And one of them was I laughed because putting my face on a bench.
Mhm,
You
that was
know,
fun.
can you talk a little bit about that, how that
One of
came
those
about, and what?
one of those first things I did, somebody offered me to put an ad on
Right.
a bench at Safeway over on McDowell on 7th Street. And I was living over there at the time at 18th Street in Granada. And so I thought, this will be awesome. It'll be in the neighborhood. I'll get my face out there. And you know what it did? My friends would call me and say, hey, I'm sitting in your face. Did it do anything for me? Did it provide any sales for me? No. But I think the bigger thing is that something's got to work is the belief that I had, and I sometimes still have, that something's got to work in terms of marketing and getting your name out there. And so many times you get a call from or a message from realtor.com or whatever this lead providing company is that's going to provide you with leads that are sourced out, et cetera. These are serious people, and they've yet to prove out to something, and it's taken a lot of money to do that, and that does get frustrating. It does make you a little bit questioning, bitter your call. But I mean, you start looking at those things and saying, okay, here's this guy that wants to create a Facebook page that's talking about people downsizing, older people getting into smaller homes, or maybe moving out of their current area, but they're real Facebook ads, etc. And none of them. I mean, we're talking about 40 or 50 different people who would contact me. We're serious.
Yeah. And I will, I
They
will
were
tell you
as,
that,
as
yeah, and I will tell you this in relation to your park bench, because I've been doing it a little bit longer than you have, but I've done all the things. I've done the billboards, I've done the TV, I've done the radio. And all I ever saw out of it was more brand recognition than actually generating business and that type of thing. I mean, every now and then you'll get something, but I think it was more of just
brand recognition.
branding of who you are. Right. Like I had a thing on Cable America that dates me, and I went to the listing appointment at the house. They had Cable America on, and my commercial came on. So at the table, wait, what? And so that itself was powerful, because okay, I'm the guy that's advertising is actually here. This is going to help me sell my house because he's
You
able.
can plan that better.
Right. So I think some of that works to an extent because it helps you brand yourself. Like Mark and Megan are working on rebranding themselves as the M, right? So something like that, even if you do those little billboards that you can pay a little bit of money for, any of you that are trying to build a brand, it's a good way to just start. You just kind of spend a couple $100 a month on those. You know what I'm talking about? The animated billboards that you can buy 30 seconds and spend $300 a month to have it. But it would be a good way just to kind of, hey, here's my brand. If you think about it, the only three brands we can really think about real estate wise, Bellator, Doug Hopkins, and the pedophile Andrew the homebuyer. But everybody, like, there's really no other agents you could think of that blasts on a consistent basis like that, right?
Well, Skeletor.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So Skeletor, Andrew the homebuyer, Doug Hopkins are the three that actually are just, to me, that I see more often than anybody
Yeah.
else. Skeletor's just gamey bullshit, you know. And Camille says that women aren't really able to do those blasts, creepy calls. Oh yes, okay. I'll tell you a story later, Camille. When I was on radio, you think it's just a women thing? No, no, it's a little freaky, man.
Yeah, I'll side with you on that one.
Yeah,
Two people who contact me that decide, hey, maybe we could. I've always wanted to. This realtor fantasy. Get the hell away from me.
right. It's a little freaky.
I'll just send him over to Mark and say, hey, he's pantsless. Contact him.
Let's get back to that Willow tour, because netting 50,000 just blows my mind.
Our best was 2020 with $20 tickets, and was 65,000 that we netted, and that was Brad Brauer was the chair at the time, so I don't know.
Tell me, how did this all come to fruition? Like, what was the thought behind it? How did you get this tour going? How long did it take to get traction? For any realtor out there that's looking to do something like this, where do they start?
This is a community thing. It's not a realtor thing. And then last year, unfortunately, it became a bit of a realtor thing where we had some people canceling houses on the market, actually hit the tour, which we've never done before. And it pissed off quite a few of our regular attendees. It's like, I can go to an open house for free. So this year we're pushing back into a higher quantity of homes. So the number one, the best we've ever done was 14 houses plus our historic fire department. And that's what I'm kind of aiming for as a president, although getting pushback from my chairs. I'm going to win. But how did this start? My predecessor started this a long time before me. And of course, the first home tours were probably a table out in the street and selling tickets for $5 a piece, and then people would tour around and go see those houses that are on tour. As that's evolved into something much bigger, we have become now, we just got Best of Phoenix New Times home tour in the Valley. We've become, sometimes there's 3,000 to 4,000 people attending this thing. Street fair out here that covers both Monte Vista and Holly from 3rd to 5th, food trucks all along 3rd Avenue, and then trolleys that take people all the way down to the streets, because Willow's a big neighborhood. If you look from McDowell to Thomas, from 1st Avenue to 7th, and some of those houses are all over. So it's become quite an event. It takes all year to plan and quite a few people to do so. There's involvement I've had in this for like many years. Like I said, I've also been the chair, but as the president, I create the committee and can put the committee chairs in place, and then we run from there. And once again, we take that money, it goes right into our treasury and goes right back into the neighborhood in many, many different directions. But so as a realtor, initially you're like, Sherry and I had done in the street fair, we've done a booth. Not very effective, but once again, keeps your name out there. Putting your ad in that brochure, which someone might have in their hands for a year, they might have it in for that day, but once again, it gets your brand out there that really gets you noticed. And people are, well, this guy knows more about Willow, and I'll get calls from people. It's like, what's it like to buy in there? What's the average price? And then they're like, oh, I was thinking 300. No, not since 2006. That's kind of the idea of getting people, keeping your brand out there. And I think that's what Chris was talking about with advertising, et cetera, making yourself well known. As my neighbor said, people know your name in this neighborhood. And there's good things about that. There's bad things about that. But I think that's the benefit in what we do, is that keeping our name out there is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, we've done the Willow tour a few times, me and my wife, and it's exceptional. It's something that, I wish other neighborhoods had, because, although Willow's awesome, I'm sure there's other historic neighborhoods, have some really beautiful houses as well.
At that point, to your point, Cantal Palmcroft does one every other year. FQ Story over here does one every year, and they're coming up here next month in December. They do an evening tour, I think, if I got that correct. And then Roosevelt used to. They've been very inconsistent and kind of lost. I know Coronado does in March, where they do their home tour as well. But I tell you this, I mean, and no ego aside, and Sherry, thank you very much. Willow is the best. And
Yeah.
that's all of us have there our time and effort into it. And I'm not patting myself on the back, because this was already started long before I got here. When that, like I said, was 2004. We just enhanced it to the best of our ability with the new people coming in. And of course, with the younger people coming in now, eventually they're just going to push me out going, yeah, old man, go away. But we're learning new things that we can do to enhance that. Like last year, we got this incredible billboard on the ground here that was flashing advertisements of all the people who put advertisements into our brochure. It was really, really cool. Actually, really cool to see my face up there too. But it kind of thanked our advertisers for advertising the brochure and giving them a little bit more of a blast into the neighborhood. Getting the live bands we've had on stage here that do amazing things and keep the street fair going really well, because there's people out there that come to the tour just for the street fair. There's also people who want to go do the tour, but the husband doesn't, or one of them's got to stay with the kid in the stroller. So they just do the street fair and they can enjoy that. There's music, there's drinks, there's food.
So what you're saying is you've elevated the standard of Willow. So
I believe so, Chris, and thank you for that. Because I think that we have done an amazing job as a neighborhood, and we continue to do so. That doesn't mean that it's easy. That doesn't mean that it's always everyone agrees on what we want to do. But when you're dealing with 996 homes, people are going to have different opinions.
So have you effectively marketed the entire neighborhood? Do you do direct mailing? Do you do door knocking? I know with the food drives, you talked about walking 1,000 houses, dropping off bags and stuff. So is it safe to say that kind of like in the East Valley, we have a neighborhood called Augusta Ranch that there's a realtor, and if you go to like, or garage house and stuff, you make sure you're a realtor. Oh yeah, call Kenny Klaus, because he's that deep in me embedded in Willow, or in Augusta Ranch. Are you that embedded in Willow to where people just know
yes,
you?
but I'd have to say there's a lot of competition, and a lot of that competition is I have to acknowledge, and also
Sure.
often just a fight for a listing against on one particular skinny crazy man. but he does an amazing job, and I love working with him when I get to. But he's also that competition, and I also have to realize that what used to be kind of a given isn't a given. I've got to get out there and make and get my name that I'm out there still, that I'm still advertising, that I'm still working. And when a house for some reason doesn't sell in my own neighborhood, let me tell you how embarrassing that is.
Right? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've all had that happen, right?
Mhm.
Where you're like, oh gosh, and you've farmed that neighborhood. Talk a little bit about, you know, as far as like, what are you seeing in Willow as far as people who are the new buyers? Are there any trends that we need to be aware of in Willow?
What was really interesting when I first moved here was that people move in, when they could afford this, maybe their second house, or as they were getting out of like law school and making their occupation change and getting to that level of pricing. They used to leave immediately, particularly the young folks that had kids that be here for 5, 6 years. The kids would then need to go to a decent school, and they didn't have one. Kudos to Phoenix Elementary, but Kenilworth is not the school that a lot of our neighbors want to send their kids to. So open enrollment changed that dramatically, so that my neighbors down the street who bought 2 years after I did ended up having 2 kids back to back, and those kids went to Madison. And there was a carpool that would take kids to Madison and school district. So around Missouri and 16th Street area, that area of town. It is the best elementary, junior high school district in the city that I know of. And that changed a lot of people from wanting to move out of a neighborhood they love to be a part of. Those kids now, because of vouchers, most likely can go to Brophy and Xavier very inexpensively. A lot of I used to think that all my neighbors were excruciatingly rich, but that's not necessarily true. They are taking the kids to Brophy and Xavier, and those kids can go to Princeton. Those kids can go to Ivy League schools because of the education they get at Brophy and Xavier. So that's kind of changing how people used to think about, okay, I loved living here. I love the neighbors. I know everybody, but I got to think of my kids. And that's not necessarily the case anymore, because you can take care of your kids without leaving.
Oh, okay.
And
So
we are
you're
seeing a
seeing
lot
young
more of that
families stay
millennial.
longer.
What's
So
that?
young families are staying longer.
You're staying longer, and they're somewhat staying a part of the neighborhood association or the involvement. But kids, for those of you who've had them, kids take precedence, and their soccer games. My little girl down the street, this girl plays hockey like a beast. That takes a lot of time and efforts that you don't have to put into the neighborhood anymore. So married but gay guy without kids, and I just have dogs. It's easier for me to be a part of that, where parents may not.
True. As Camille was struggling with her little one earlier, thinking you don't have no time frame with the children. They just decide to have fun. Plus, anything else? Any other insights you want to share about your career, Brats? We're
Smiling face and real.
right. I was like, baby, Camille, I'll hold a baby, but then I realized we're on Zoom. That's one of
The thing about what I love about not only this, but the fireside chats it generally motivates the crud out of me when I walk out of there. Is that we toss things back and forth. We have an idea that we can share. That I've never had this. Realty execs, we used to have a meeting once a month, I think, and you talk about touts, you talk about this, you talk about things like everything going on in the business, but it wasn't as uplifting, as motivating as something like this is, like something like Fireside Chats is. And I think that's a huge benefit to all of us that really take part in this, that really take advantage of what Nick has had created here, what you guys are creating here, to kind of help all of us and elevate that standard. As Camille and I were just going back and forth about, and Sherry, do people need to know more about selling these historic neighborhoods? Yeah, they do. And Willow isn't, can't tell Palmcroft. Willow is not Coronado. There are differences in those, or Ashland Place where Sherry lives. There are very, very different communities and very different potential rules. Willow's probably got the most stringent, but I know what those are.
Yeah, and that's powerful too. So when you're showing houses to a buyer, do you just, because obviously they're probably not going to ask those questions, so it's something you just kind of educate as you're walking through homes and going to and from properties?
I did this on Saturday. My God, I sent an email out to Mark and Megan. Hopefully that they'll do an open house, because this was huge, and also to Sherry and Nola, because I need something next Saturday. But plug. But at the point was that there were 35 people at this open house between 10 and 1. And actually I was there till 1:30 because people kept coming. And there was a lot of times I couldn't get exactly what I needed to everyone, but people who were there for 30 and 45 minutes, and I'm not kidding, people there 45 minutes at a time. Two little boys came back and saw it yesterday with their agent, but I was able to share a lot of that information. I make that joke again that I have a lot of useless information in my head, but if I don't share that, these people will never know that. And I do have a lot of what I call useless information, but honestly, it is helpful in terms of people making a decision to purchase a house there, how they sell the house in a neighborhood like this, and what the changes in rules, laws. I don't get into code, bite me with code. The reality is that there's a lot of old information. Here's why is this way? Well, I know that, and I'm happy to share.
Yeah, and now that just a side step about marketing, things like that. But I follow you on LinkedIn, and so you have some really cool nuggets that you do that are like professional little, marketing ads that you will. Have you thought about doing that and just have it focused on Willow? Like just do a whole campaign where like, and where I live, I'm trying to be the dominant agent in my neighborhood because there's not one dominant agent, right? So I know Willow, like you said, you have many agents. So I put content on our social media page for the neighborhood a couple times a month. Very, very relevant, very active, so much so some neighbors think I run the Facebook page and I don't. But have you ever thought about just doing some content for Willow? So you're just, when somebody types in Willow, then Brad Brauer just pops up because you could do walkthrough videos through the neighborhood, just all different kinds of things if you think outside the box. Have you thought about doing that because you have so much knowledge? And if you share,
can you do that to an extent?
Yeah.
I can do that to an extent on my own social media, Chris, but we have this really mean admin on the Willow Facebook page. His name is Jeremy. But if I start pushing my own business, they'll delete. Okay,
well, not so not necessarily just on the Willow page, but in general. Like if most people nowadays are going to ask ChatGPT, "Hey, find an agent here," or they're going to go to Google machine and type houses for sale in Willow. So if you're doing it, like if you have a YouTube page or you have your own personal Facebook page, if you're throwing that up as reels, maybe a few times a week, you're just focused on Willow. Hey, did you know this? This about Willow? This interesting fact about Willow is you're not in the laws from back in 1920. You're not allowed to drink water while standing on one leg in the kitchen, right? Because I don't know the rules, but you're going to have some silly rules and shit that you know because you know everything about Willow, right?
Right. So I'm trying to do that with you've seen some of the reels I've posted on Facebook, particularly Jacob. That little boy is amazing. So the reels that I'm doing on walkthroughs, et cetera, Zoom, the drone shots, et cetera, I think are really, really cool. I'm also trying to work with this guy on Instagram, and that's where, things get a little bit less that I understand. I'm just learning about them now, but doing reels on that and trying to be consistent about posting those reels about historics central and in Willow would not be a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I think that would serve you well, and I'm happy to kind of show you how to do some of that shit because I do it all the time. It's not as hard as you think it is, especially if you get an app called Captions. It makes it really simple. You just kind of set.
I think Sula was talking about that.
Yeah. You kind of talk about what you can talk about for 15 to 30 seconds, and then I can show you how to schedule out reels, things like that. So you can just spend one morning creating content, and then you can schedule it out for 7 days, and you set it, forget it.
Brad,
and that goes with all of you. If anybody wants some help with that stuff, I'd be happy to share.
Much appreciated. Because again, Nick and I have been talking about this for 5 years. Is sometimes the technology it just moves so fast. It's hard to keep up with, and it makes you really feel your age because here's Destiny just rocking with something, and you're just like, okay, right. she could do this in her sleep, where this is going to take me months to understand.
Right. Yeah. See, I don't know TikTok, but I'm sure Destiny crushes TikTok because the younger generation, it's all about TikTok. Where I'm like, what the fuck? Nick's on there buying shit, but he's not actually doing anything productive.
He just gets lost in the rabbit hole.
Right? I get these random things every now and then at night, 11 o'clock, TikTok video from Nick. It's always funny and relevant to whatever conversation you're having. So we got about 15 minutes left. Does anybody have any more questions for Brad about his being in the business for 25 years and all the things he's done? Mark?
I'd like to ask Brad, just to kind of wrap things up here. Brad, so you are embedded in Willow. You are the man to go, right? And what advice would you give to an agent who is looking to crack into a neighborhood, but they know that somebody such as yourself or another, has been there for 10 years and they're farming that neighborhood, what advice would you give to an agent that says, I really love this neighborhood. I would want to get some of that action. Where do I start?
Ask Camille about Coronado. I'm kidding, of course. But I think that just like anything else, just getting involved in an area or a neighborhood, like I was talking about Estrella Mountain Ranch, when they were building that back in the early 2000s, I did a lot of work out there. But just learn about the neighborhood, learn about what's being built there. When you comes back to one of these older neighborhoods, there's a boatload of information out there. I didn't just learn this. I had created a website with every single historic district on my website. You can find out information about all of them. And historic preservation has booklets on all those neighborhoods. There's a map of all the neighborhoods as well. I got into a fight with Sherry Rampey about being 35 or 36 once, and I won. But she didn't know about Los Olivos. But at the
He did win. He did win.
No, having that knowledge about, just the useless information, like I said earlier, about the Federal Housing Authority saying, okay, if you want our 30-year loan, which becomes Fannie Mae, then you're going to build to our standards. And those standards became the ranch.
Nice.
And that's where the idea came from. And that's why we stuck with that till the 1970s when suddenly we could move into the stick and stucco concept that we're doing now still. But other people don't know that. And Sherry says, would you fight any two-story addition regardless of the design in Willow? And if the answer is yes, do you think that you would ever chase buyers away that might be good neighbors? Or could you lose those good neighbors when they can't build something? Sherry, yeah, I would, because the concept of Willow, and then when I fought 309, it was because I could see it from my front yard. And number one, that's a violation of the Willow Conservation Plan. Number two, it's a violation of historic preservation. I shouldn't be able to see the addition in their backyard. Jody at HP didn't even have the front schematics to know that you could see this from the front. Yes, so I would fight anything that's visible from the front. Another agent who's bought the rabbi's house over on Almeria has built something in the back that's taller, but you can't see it from the front. I don't fight.
Christy pointed out, and she led with this statement, don't hate me for saying this, but homes.com is a great source for neighborhood info.
It is, and I don't hate
Jim
it at all.
Yeah.
I've got they're boosting my listings right now. The listing I just posted on Thursday that went live has already had, as of Saturday, had over 2,400 views.
Wow.
So, I mean, that says a lot. And where homes.com, particularly with advertising that they've done and getting David from Schitt's Creek as their spokesperson, has done great things for them. And I don't mind them at all. Are you doing paid? Yeah, I am. And I question that, Megan, is that worth it? But it's getting the views. Is it getting the sale? Not yet.
Megan asked if he does the paying for the boost for homes.com, because we all know homes.com is.
But homes.com is not expensive on a monthly basis, so I have no issue with them. Some other CMAs that I'm working with right now are grossly expensive, and they're a little bit overwhelming to me. And I just got a text from them today going, hey, you've kind of gone radio silent. And I am, because I'm overwhelmed.
Brad, pitch to me why I should bring a buyer to Willow.
Why?
Because Brad
the
wants to
greatest
sell
thing
us
about
a
this
thing.
neighborhood, and Jeremy can attest to this as well, is that you know your neighbors. So when I first moved here in 2004, I just bought the house finally. I finally closed it on June of 2004. July 1st, I came up with some hiking buddies from that Saturday morning. Looking at the house, I was so proud. My God, I was so proud that I could live in Willow. I can afford this. My business is doing well enough. And we fought through a horrible situation with the short sale. And like I said, not even knowing the term at the time. But here comes my next door neighbor, Linda, who's been there since 74 and still is. And then her next door neighbor, Essie, had been there since 1952. And now her son owns that house with cookies, their phone numbers, etc. That the great thing about living in Willow, we're blending this in even to the new people who come in who aren't used to this concept in any way, shape, or form, is that you know your neighbors. You don't just pull into your garage-scape house and maybe wave, but you don't really know your neighbors. You know your neighbors, you know who they are, you watch their houses when they go on vacation, you have dinners with them. We have a cocktail party once a month in this neighborhood. And so we meet other neighbors from other streets because it is a big neighborhood. But there's a specialty about this that I've not seen in my 41 years of living in Metro Phoenix area, where people really know each other and care about each other and care about their neighborhood. And that's the greatest thing about Willow. And I'm not saying that that doesn't exist in FQ Story, that doesn't exist in Ashland Place. I don't have the knowledge of their community like I do Willow.
Right, and that does exist in other neighborhoods that are not just historic, just so you know. Even though I know historic is a really big niche for our brokerage because that's, you know, because of people like you and Sherry and Camille, et cetera. Anything else you want to share before we wrap this up, Brad?
Once again, thanks for doing this. This is an opportunity to share. Mondays at 9. I'm normally at the gym, so I might have to watch this on the recordings, but I'm enjoying the crowd of this. I'm also enjoying how many people are attending who may not even be speaking, but you know, the opportunity to do so is always there. And of course, the questions that come up on the chat. This is another great opportunity. Thank you guys for doing this. Creating this. Nick, thank you for Brokers Hub and also for the fireside chats, giving us those opportunities to share information with each other. And, you know, sometimes that's a bitch session. I know that. And sometimes I'm bitching. But at the same time, it gives us that opportunity to share information and learn from each other. And to quote the three of you, Nick, Chris, Marco, elevating that standard into something that would be Cypress to something much better than the rest of the things we deal with out there. And it's like Camille's question is to, you know, should people know more? Should we require of them? I wish we could, but at the same time, I don't want to limit someone to learning about what they could do in any neighborhood.
That's good. Yeah. Thank you, Brad. And don't worry, I'm going to poke at all of you to be on the show. So watch your emails because I already have somebody in mind for next week. Go ahead, Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. It was fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. That was amazing.
Thanks, guys.
One of the things I wanted to comment on was that with Brad in particular is it's not just being a part of you know, the board or whatever. Every time you're doing something like that, you're putting yourself out there, and it's a way to elevate your voice within the community. And that becomes media, that becomes image marketing. And if you're going to be a secret agent, then don't do any of that stuff. But then don't be surprised when your bank account is also secret. So really putting yourself out there is a way to do it. And I think, you know, Brad being a part of Willow and being part of the tour is a fantastic way and a cheap way. It's time, but not necessarily money of getting your name and face out there. So with that said, I would like to share my screen with you really quick because we've got the annual food drive stuff coming up. And so this year we're not doing the actual food drive, but we are doing the QR codes. We can get donations for that. And you can find that by going to our website. If you go to the dashboard and go over to, move all of you, where it says BHR logos, forms, and more. If you click on that, under all of the logos, there's a link for BHR events. And within there, you'll see Food Drive 2020,
Awesome.
2025. There is a postcard link, and it's just the backside of the postcard. So you can upload that to Brivity and create the backside of the postcard if you want to mail them out to the communities that you are serving in. Or there's also a social media square that you can post on Facebook or Instagram that Tyler's created for us. All of these, the QR code goes to Square. We'll collect all the funds and then we'll publish what we raise the end of December and send that out. So, you know, a little something that you can do for marketing.
Is there a cutoff date to this, Nick?
I put it on our page all the way through December 31st, but probably around Christmas time we'll collect. I mean, we'll just keep the link open. Not a big deal. We can do multiple donations. The other thing that I really wanted to show to you would be on our events page, we've got obviously Elevating Your Voice on Mondays. I did put a link to the donation page, but we've got the home tour that's coming up tomorrow. That's a great way to network with your fellow agents. And then on Wednesday, kind of sneaking up because we typically don't have a CE class this early in the month, but because of the holiday, it's Brad's favorite, which is fair housing, but it is going to be with a new instructor teaching this class in particular for us, Karen Kay. She's the one that taught on the water earlier this year. She's 100 miles an hour, a lot of fun. And I asked her what she wanted to teach, and she said that this particular class was her favorite to teach. And so that's going to be on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, the historic tour. So this week is going to be a super busy week for stuff around the brokerage if you'd like to be out there. So that is all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming
Yeah.
along and joining us.
Thank you.
Have a fantastic day. Be productive, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
You
Bye.
too.